The Galactic Council had ruled the known universe for 12,000 years. Their grand hall floated at the center of the Nexus system, a massive structure built from the bones of dead stars and the crystals of forgotten worlds. Representatives from 900 species gathered there each cycle to discuss trade, territory, and the endless politics of space. They believed themselves to be the masters of everything that existed between the galaxies. Elder stood before the council that day, his ancient body wrapped in the ceremonial robes of his people. His species was among the oldest in the council, having achieved space travel when most other races were still learning to make fire. His 4 eyes, dimmed by age but still sharp with wisdom, scanned the faces of the assembled representatives. He had come to deliver a warning, one that his people had passed down through countless generations. "There is a world at the edge of the Orion Arm," began, his voice carrying through the vast chamber. "A small blue planet that circles an unremarkable yellow star. The beings there call themselves humans. I have come to warn you about them." Laughter erupted from several sections of the hall. Ambassador of the Empire, a towering figure with scales that shimmered like polished metal, was the first to speak. "You waste our time with stories about primitives, Elder. We have scanned that sector. Those creatures have barely left their own moon. They fight among themselves constantly. They will destroy themselves within a few of their centuries." Remained calm. He had expected this reaction. "My ancestors watched them when they were still living in caves. They saw something in those early humans that frightened them deeply, something that made them leave that sector and never return." "And what was that?" asked Lady of the Etherian Collective, her translucent form flickering with amusement. "Survival," replied. "Adaptation. Rage. My ancestors saw a species that refused to accept defeat. They faced predators larger and stronger than themselves, and they won. They faced ice ages that should have frozen them all, and they survived. They faced plagues, famines, and every natural disaster their world could throw at them, and still they grew stronger. My ancestors believed that any species with such determination should be left alone. They feared what would happen if such beings ever reached the stars." The council laughed again. High Commander of the military coalition slammed his massive fist on his podium. "We have conquered thousands of worlds. Our fleets number in the millions. You expect us to fear some barely evolved primates who still struggle to leave their own solar system?" Shook his head slowly. "I do not ask you to fear them now. I ask you to leave them alone. Do not provoke them. Do not underestimate them. Let them develop in peace, and perhaps one day they may join us as partners rather than enemies." The council voted unanimously to ignore the elders' warning. They had more important matters to discuss: trade disputes, border conflicts, the never-ending maintenance of their vast empire. The humans were dismissed as irrelevant, a footnote in the galaxy's grand story. Returned to his and recorded his warning in the sacred archives, hoping that future generations would be wiser than the present one. 50 years passed. The council forgot about the old elders' words. They forgot about the small blue planet at the edge of the Orion Arm. They continued their games of power and politics, never looking toward that distant corner of space. Then the Empire made a terrible mistake. A mining fleet entered the Sol system, the star system that contained the human. They had detected rich mineral deposits on several of the system's outer planets and moons. The fleet commander, a young officer named, saw no reason to concern himself with the primitive species living on the third planet. His sensors showed their technology to be centuries behind his own. They had no shields, no faster-than-light travel. Their weapons were laughably primitive. Ordered his fleet to establish mining operations on the fourth planet, a red world the humans called Mars. He did not bother to communicate with the natives. They were beneath his notice. The humans noticed, however. Their telescopes and satellites detected the massive vessels entering their system. Their governments debated what to do. Some wanted to attempt communication. Others wanted to hide and hope the visitors would leave. But there was another faction, one that remembered every invasion, every conquest, every time their people had been underestimated by enemies who believed themselves superior. Within 6 months, humanity launched its response. They sent their fastest ships, vessels that the Council would have considered barely capable of interplanetary travel, toward the fleet. They detected them coming and prepared for what they assumed would be a laughable attempt at resistance. They were wrong. The human ships carried weapons that they had never encountered before. Nuclear devices, yes, but modified in ways that their scientists had not imagined. The humans had spent their entire history fighting each other, developing new and creative ways to destroy their enemies. They had turned warfare into an art form, a science, a way of life. Every generation had produced new weapons, new tactics, new strategies for victory. The first ship was destroyed before its crew even understood what was happening. The second fell moments later, watched in disbelief as his mighty fleet began to burn. He ordered a retreat, but the humans pursued. They chased his ships all the way to the edge of their system, destroying every vessel they could catch. Escaped with only 3 ships out of the 40 he had brought, he returned to the Council with a warning of his own. "They are not primitives," he reported, his voice still shaking with shock. "They are warriors. Every single one of them is a warrior." The Council did not believe him. They assumed he had simply encountered bad luck, perhaps a malfunction in his weapons systems or a failure of leadership. They sent a larger fleet, 100 ships under the command of Admiral, one of their most celebrated military leaders. Admiral never returned. Not a single ship survived. The humans captured the wreckage of the vessels and began studying the technology inside. Within 10 years, they had reverse-engineered faster-than-light travel. Within 20, they had developed shield technology that exceeded anything the Council possessed. And then the humans came for answers. Their first diplomatic ship arrived at the Galactic Council's doorstep without warning. It simply appeared out of nowhere, bypassing every sensor and detection system the Council had developed. The ship was small, barely larger than a shuttle, but it broadcast a message that echoed through every speaker in the Great Hall. "We are humanity. You entered our home without permission. You attacked our people without cause. We have come to discuss terms." The Council scrambled to respond. They offered apologies, reparations, trade agreements. They tried to placate the humans with promises of technology and territory. The human ambassador, a woman named, listened to their offers with a calm expression that revealed nothing. "You ignored your own elder's warning," she said finally. "He told you to leave us alone. He told you what we are capable of. You did not listen." Elder, now ancient beyond measure, was brought before the Council. He looked at the human ambassador and smiled a tired smile. "I warned them," he said. "I told them about your species. I told them about your history, your wars, your endless capacity for survival. I told them that any species that could defeat extinction itself should be respected." Nodded. "Our people have a saying, Elder. It goes like this: what does not kill us makes us stronger. You understood that. They did not." The Council waited in terrified silence as outlined humanity's demands. They expected conquest, subjugation, perhaps even extinction. The other great powers of the galaxy had always sought to dominate their enemies. That was the way of the universe. But humanity surprised them again. "We do not want your empire," said. "We do not want your planets or your resources. We want respect. We want to be left alone until we choose to join your community. We want the right to develop in our own way, at our own pace. And we want your word that no species will ever again enter our territory without permission." The Council agreed immediately. They had no choice. Over the following decades, humanity's reputation spread throughout the galaxy. Stories were told of their ferocity in battle, their ingenuity in technology, and their strange, contradictory nature. They were capable of terrible violence, yet they created beautiful art. They fought wars among themselves, yet they came together against outside threats with terrifying unity. They were fragile physically, yet their spirits seemed unbreakable. Other species began to seek humanity out, not as enemies but as friends and allies. The humans accepted some and refused others, always on their own terms. They joined the Galactic Council eventually, not as supplicants but as equals. Their representative sat in a place of honor, next to the seat that had been reserved for Elder before his passing. The Elder had lived just long enough to see his warnings vindicated. In his final message to the Council, recorded on his deathbed, he offered one last piece of wisdom. "I spent my long life studying species across the galaxy," he said. "I saw empires rise and fall. I watched civilizations destroy themselves and others achieve greatness. But in all my years, I never encountered a species quite like humanity. They are chaos and order combined. They are destruction and creation walking together. They love and hate with equal passion. They are everything we fear and everything we admire, wrapped in fragile bodies that somehow contain infinite strength. I warned you not to underestimate them. Now you understand why." The message was added to the sacred archives of the, preserved for future generations alongside its original warning. Young scholars studied it carefully, trying to understand the nature of the strange species that had humbled the mightiest powers in the galaxy. But some things, the scholars eventually realized, could not be understood through study alone. Some things could only be experienced, and so they became one of humanity's closest allies, learning from them not through observation but through friendship. The galaxy changed because of humanity. It became more cautious, more respectful of young species still developing among the stars. It remembered the lesson that they had learned through blood and fire. It remembered what happened when you ignored an elder's warning and underestimated the small blue planet at the edge of the Orion Arm. And humanity continued to grow, to explore, to reach for new horizons. They carried their warrior spirit with them wherever they went, but they also carried their art, their music, their stories, and their endless curiosity about the universe around them. They had earned their place among the stars, not through conquest but through proving that they belonged there. They had shown the galaxy their might, and the galaxy had finally learned to listen. The council halls that had once laughed its warning now spoke his name with reverence. They told his story to new members, reminding them of what happened when wisdom was ignored. They pointed to humanity as proof that the universe was full of surprises, and that even the oldest and most powerful civilizations could still have much to learn. Humanity had asked only for respect. In the end, they received much more than that. They received something that no other species had ever truly earned from the Galactic Council. They received fear, yes, but also admiration. They received caution, but also friendship. And they received, at long last, the understanding that Elder had tried to give them so many years before. Some species were not meant to be conquered. Some species were meant to conquer themselves, to overcome every obstacle in their path, and to emerge stronger than before. Humanity was such a species, and the galaxy was finally wise enough to recognize it.